Welcome to another episode of Acts of the Blood God and Independent RPG Podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me, as always, my lovely co-host, Nadia Oxford.
Hello. Hello, everybody in Canada. Happy Thanksgiving. I forgot it's Thanksgiving weekend. So if you're, I see your confusion there. It's like, I don't know, for some reason, Thanksgiving's a lot more laid back in Canada. So it's just kind of a day off. But sometimes there's turkey. So I hope you're having turkey and pumpkin pie. Yeah, that sounds good, actually. Don't tell my endocrinologist I'm going to have some pumpkin pie.
Indeed, and happy Indigenous Persons Day to all who celebrate here in the U.S. as of the release of this episode. Also joining me, my equally lovely co-host, Eric Van Allen.
Hi, I'm really tired. I built a gazebo yesterday, and that was a really bad choice, so I'm just here trying to stay alive now.
Were you infected by the dad virus that makes you spontaneously build things? You're gonna build a dick!
No, Eric, tell them what you were really doing.
Okay, well, it was called a gazebo, but it was really more of like a tent. Lab. It was like an overhang. It was like a shade. Four pillars.
Oh, so it was a shade structure.
That's post show. That's post show talk right there, Michael.
Okay.
Save it for the post show.
The post show.
The post show. Yeah.
Oh. And joining us, that voice that you just heard is returning champion and my colleague, Michael Hyam. Welcome back.
Hi. Wait, is this the first time I'm on since joining IGN? No, this is not.
Maybe. It's been a minute.
But anyway, it has been a minute. Thank you. Yeah, but thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be here. Sometimes I wake up to the voices of Blood God hosts because I go to sleep. Yeah, I know. I go to sleep. There are times in which I go to sleep with podcasts on, and it just like auto plays whatever's left in my playlist, and sometimes it plays a Blood God episode, and I hear Eric yapping about like Unicorn Overlord or something, and I'm like, did I stay in the Discord? Am I in the Discord channel right now? So it's lovely.
Am I sleeping on show?
Sometimes I join your like Discord at night. Sometimes I just like whisper to you like, play Unicorn Overlord. Play it.
It's a great game. Have you not played it, Michael? It's really good.
I play like 20 hours ago. I previewed it and
finish Unicorn Overlord.
I should probably finish it.
Michael's here with us because this week we are going to be reviewing Metaphor ReFantazio, the new RPG by the developers of the Persona 3, 4, and 5 games, Katsura Hashino and company. It had excellent reviews. Eric's rolled credits. Michael's rolled credits. I've played some of it. Nadia's been playing a lot of it. We all have takes of various dimensions, so we'll be getting to that in just a moment. But first, if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where for just $1 a month, you get access to an ad-free version of this show, and you also get access to our Discord. Your generous donations ensure that we can continue to do this show, which we have been doing for the past 4 years, almost 4 years at this point.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a Pantheon going on right now, where at the $10 level, you get access to the Pantheon. We recently did a Pandemonium with Sonic Chronicles and the Dark Brotherhood. I'm sure that was a lot of fun. Sadly, I didn't get to be on that one, but what an interesting slice of BioWare history. Go and find out if it actually got into the Pandemonium, the RPG hell to our RPG heaven. But we're back to doing a regular Pantheon this month, and we are doing Shadow Heart's Covenant for our spooky season Pantheon. Ooh. And finally, Victor Hunter has been exploring Final Fantasy XI as part of an ongoing project, which he is calling Accept 11. And he is showing all the reasons that it's such an amazing MMORPG. So go check that out. Okay. It's time now for our review of Metaphor ReFantazio, the new RPG that was developed that is being published by Atlas. Its current Metacritic, 93, just behind Astrobot and Elden Ring. It's already at 1 million units, the highest ever concurrence for an Atlas game. And now my challenge to all of you. Please try and articulate what Metaphor is without using the word persona. Eric, Go.
Oh no. I mean, you can read so many words about it online on bloodgodpod.com because we had our first ever written published review on the website because of some weird happenstances. So you can go read my words there.
Bloodgodpod.com, our blog.
We have a Bloodgod blog. That's like the blah 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 Bloodgod blog, right? It's going to be a real tongue tire. Look, I compared it to Persona, so already I'm gonna fail this. But like,
By the way, there's a punishment for every time you use the word Persona, so tread carefully.
Good. I mean, I believe the way this was phrased originally when this project ReFantazio, or I almost called it ReFantazio, but it wasn't Italian yet. It was like designed to be something like a third pillar for Atlas, and I think they have accomplished that. I think they have created, even if they don't continue this exact world or this exact setup, I hope they do. Honestly, the way the game ends, I think does leave it a little bit open for them to do more with this game. But like, I really just love what they have created. It is very much built on the bones of its predecessors, but it's also really fresh and new in a way too, where it takes a lot of those ideas and even ideas from other RPGs and adds a lot of its own stuff to create something that feels really fresh and interesting. And it feels like all those memes where people would be like, they don't make turn-based RPGs anymore and they don't make them like they used to. Like, they did it. Like, that's it. Like, Metaphor ReFantazio is like the AAA high budget turn-based RPG that you've been waiting for a long time. And I think it's really cool to see that, because we've seen CRPGs get the glow up, action RPGs get the glow up, but like seeing a turn-based RPG like this with all these great systems, with, oh my god, just the best art style maybe in the last, like, at least since Disco Elysium, just an incredible art style. Every part of
I'm
this
glad
game
they
is
used
so good.
turn-based JRPG to differentiate it from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which would have been crying over there in the corner in terms of AAA.
Turn-based JRPG, or even, you know, like, you have your Ys 10 Nordics is coming out pretty soon as well, so that's it's Nadia's jam. I really cannot stress enough how much I love Metaphor. It has absolutely blown me away. I love its characters. I love its story. I love its world. Heisme is the greatest. I will fight for Heisme. Maybe one of the best party characters that one of these games has ever had, and really goes to show that when you move the setting out from a high school and into like just a broader world and journey, and you have characters who are maybe more world weary, older, have experienced some other things, you can do some really great stuff with the storytelling. And I think the bonds and relationships in this game are some of Atlas's best when it comes to that stuff. So a few highlights are like Alonso and Brigitte and Heisme, obviously, all freaking fantastic. So I love this game. You know, we're going to talk a lot about it, so I'm not going to ramble on too much more, but it's good. It's really, really good.
Okay, I'm going to try and take a stab at this, because we're talking about Persona, but kind of in a roundabout way by referring to predecessors in high schools. Oh, hey, no, I wasn't... Metaphor ReFantazio is a fantasy RPG with some serious Record of Lodoss War vibes, but it integrates a lot of Renaissance imagery, interestingly, Italian. It's sort of a far cry from the much more, your typical Tolkien stuff. I love the elves with the giant ears and the big shoulder pads. That's a lot of fun. The towns are really interesting to explore. It has a format of a kind of a day-to-day, day-by-day approach, where during the day, you're going around town, you're interacting with your followers, you're taking on little side quests, and then you can also go and explore dungeons, and it's all integrated really well. There's a class system.
Has any other game ever done that, Kat?
I'm just talking about the format and the structure of this game. The dungeons are quite long and have checkpoints, and you're encouraged to kind of take a break and heal up your character. There's a little bit of a campfire vibe going on. with them after you complete the dungeon, where your characters are all sitting around, like having a chat, having some food. And then your class system, it kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy V, actually, because you have your individual class, but then if you unlock a different class, you can start inheriting abilities by spending X number of points. And I think, especially early, if you can figure out how to combine those class aspects, you're going to do that. That is a really essential way to be able to play Metaphor. But at base, this game's gorgeous. It's just an eye catch all the time. It is really fun to look at.
Can I just interject and say that the press turn system is one of the best battle systems ever invented for an RPG? I love it so much. I love it in this game because it really does kind of force you to think, and status ailments can be a huge deterrent, because if you miss an attack, you miss a turn, and you can get really, really screwed up. And an interesting thing about this battle system also is that when you're up against weaker RPGs, you can't. When you're up against weaker enemies, you can rally your party and do the usual turn-based thing. But you can also kind of do like a physical attack on the field, and if they're a weak enemy, you just kill them outright and you get some experience for that. But if they're a stronger enemy, and you're able to kind of make those pot shots that will weaken them to a certain point, you can get like a really good first hit on them. But if you screw it up, they can get a good hit on you. Even a weaker enemy can really mess you up if they get you in a loop of like where they get like your weakness, or they get a critical, or they afflict you with a status ailment. So yeah, it's a very kind of active system in the way that I'm never bored when I'm in an encounter, even with like weaker enemies. Like you do have to kind of fight for your supper in this game.
I think to that point, one of the things I love about Metaphor is that all of its systems feel really robust, really like thought out, and they're also like very involved at all times. So there are status ailments that can be extremely debilitating for your party. They can also be debilitating for the enemy if you know what the enemy is like weak to, and you can inflict them with something. And maybe you go and you get intel, which I love the intel system. You can go talk to the
intel's really good.
An informant before you go to a dungeon. Get a heads up on like, hey, the boss of this dungeon is weak to this, or they're easily like enraged or something like that. And then you can go and use that on them and flip the tables a little bit. And also like the attacking in the field, on its surface, it's a very basic system. Hit an enemy. If you can kill them in the field, if you're like way over leveled, you just take them out there. If you're at their level, you can get that first strike, and if they're way above your level, they might armor through some attacks or things like that. They might be a little bit tougher to get that first strike on. However, later in the game, you can cook food that will let you do stuff like you're invincible in the field for like a certain amount of time, or you get instant kills when you strike something in the field for a certain amount of time, which let me tell you, finisher noodles go hard. That stuff
sounds like very Heismade food. I don't have that yet.
It is.
I think it is a Heismade food, actually.
Yeah. One thing that's actually really brilliant in this game to kind of get you closer to the character is that one of the things you can do when you're traveling, because you spend a lot of time traveling, is cook. And every character has their signature dish, and they will kind of tell you how to prepare it and what it means to them. And I remember Heismade saying, we're in my village, like we mostly, have wheat that we farm, and that's why we became really good at making noodles. So little touches like that.
Heismade really up on the table, like pounding the dough with his feet. Like, back in my village.
Enjoy my foot noodles. Good, thanks. But then again, they make you invincible, so I'll eat the foot noodles. Thank you, Heisman. Don't give me a hantavirus, please.
It was really weird to be finishing Metaphor at the same time I was playing World of Ruin FF6, because we had that boss battle on stream where I managed to berserk the dude at the top of the cultist tower to like make sure that he could never cast on me. And in my head, I was going, oh, that's like something I did in Metaphor. And that was really cool to have that connection, to be like, oh, Metaphor is playing in that realm where this RPG system, like I strongly dislike when RPGs are like, well, you can get poisoned and you can get these status effects, but they never work on the boss. No. You got to fight the boss by the rules. And instead, a lot of the fights, even just like basic boss fights in this game, like very standard dungeon boss fights, have a lot of like strats that you can employ against them, and different strats too that you can try and figure something out and really do something cool with them, which all feeds back into the archetype system being so malleable, being so open to doing what you want to do even as you're evolving along these lines.
Yeah, there's actually, like, I'm impressed with how integrated the systems are together. Eric, you mentioned the informant system. I don't want to like get into a spoiler here, but there's a really brilliant kind of quest where the informant has to, he kind of has to tell you about these weaknesses, or you can fumble against the boss. And these are very dangerous fights because they have like restrictions. So I didn't get the informant's information for one of the boss fights, and I got just destroyed until he told me, okay, here's what you need to do. And it's like, oh, okay, that actually worked. And it's really cool because there's some twists in that area too.
Those parts feel so classic.
I'm going to rewind now because we're getting really into the weeds around metaphor, and Michael hasn't had a chance to talk.
Yeah,
so I'm going to say, Michael,
hi.
What is metaphor? You can't use the word persona.
Oh, it's like a high school simulator, but grown up. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like that's a drink.
I feel like that's a half point.
Damn. No. Well, what metaphor is to me is, I think we touched on a lot of the systems, a lot of how it is a direct evolution of Atlus's preceding games. I've said as much in my preview. I think that's a really good shorthand for describing the game to someone who is familiar with that realm. But if you're not, I think you did a very good job of like taking a step back and be like, maybe not. People aren't as deep in the weeds as we are in the RPG world. So yeah, you do spend days in a calendar system. It's a long RPG. It has this intricate turn-based system, and I think the time, you tell people that it's an 80-hour RPG, and it's very intimidating because that is an investment.
Yeah.
But as Atlas RPGs always do, is that time is, you spend that time to really connect with the world, and part of it is a life simulator. It is that social simulator. So, and the deeper you go on it, the more time you spend with it, the more connected, the more invested you feel emotionally too. That by the time you reach the turning points of this game, you are moved by the things that happen in it, and I think more so than maybe Persona. More so than my personal experience with other games. That's what I was gonna say. That because this game tackles subjects that I was hesitant to see Atlus try because they hadn't really tried it before. Their previous games had touched on social topics, and they have either absolutely nailed it, and then there are times that they have fumbled it. But I always admire their ability to try it. So here I'm like, oh, okay, they're trying something. And rather than looking at this game as like a teaching tool for someone's politics, I was rather going into this game looking at, can Atlus, do they got the juice? Do they know what they're talking about? Are they able to tell this kind of story? Because there are many ways in which you can fumble it. And I think in talking about metaphor, I've also talked to, in the same breath as Final Fantasy 16. There are similarities in the fact that they are both fantasy worlds from these big renowned developers are now trying to talk about classism and racism and inequalities in a fantasy world. And like there are elements of 16 that I absolutely love that I think they get right. But by and large, metaphor is a much more holistic take on it, and I think it is also a deeper take on it because you do spend 80 hours of that game entrenched in that world and connecting with people in the bond system, and the bonds and followers are all vessels for you to understand different aspects of that world. So not only are you connecting with characters on a deeper level, you are also given, like, one is about someone's religious journeys, another one is about how capitalism forced this person to be a thief and how that has backfired on them. Another one is like, my entire village burned down because of war and the incessant need for war and all sort of stuff. And how do I rebuild my life, my family's legacy? And like, there are all of these bonds and follow. And like, Brigida's one that's like about weapons and being a weapon seller and how like conflicted you are. Like, this is my business, but I also hate it in some regard. And so that goes in interesting directions. They're all they all teach you a little bit of something about that world. So when you do get the big picture moments, when you do get those grand gestures, it all kind of makes sense because you can pull from all of these experiences that you have with all these characters. So I also think that maybe it is not a nuanced take on its politics, but it is one that understands the material it's working with. That's how I always describe it. As I describe it in my review, is like, yeah, they're not saying anything new, especially if you're, some of us are entrenched in progressive politics in our personal lives. But I play this game and be like, yeah, okay, this seems like it's written by people who understand what they're talking about. And so because they're able to understand what they're doing, when you do finish this game, it just feels very good to have played a game that makes its statement very clear through a very, very good, lengthy RPG. I
recently finished. I was on a plane last night home from the East Coast, and I shotgunned like a good 5 or 6 hours worth of Metaphor and managed to get through. I would describe it as the introductory dungeon or the introductory boss. The tutorial in this game is really quite long, and the feeling that I have is that I'm sitting down to a whole feast, a massive, massive feast of an RPG, and I feel a little bit like a sommelier, like kind of drinking, me like, interesting. Notes of Ultima 4. Quite. Because when I look at the things like the way that they handle the different virtues, like intelligence, it's wisdom, I think it is.
Yeah. Wisdom, eloquence,
temperance, imagination, that you kind of level up by helping the different characters. That the decisions aren't as deep, at least in the early going. But I was like, how interesting that Ultima 4 in its own way should manifest in the way that you're handling your relationships in this game. And I appreciate all the different influences that Metaphor ReFantazio manages to pull out while also managing to retain its own kind of distinct identity. But
I think,
Nadia, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say, I think the cool thing about those sections where you're doing that to level up your virtues is that it does tie back into the story themes that Michael was talking about, because early on, like, a really good way to up your tolerance is to talk to a member of the Mistari, who are like a religiously persecuted group within like the world of Uchronia, or the kingdom of Uchronia. And so they are like persecuted because the state religion is sanctism. And your protagonist, someone was posting, I love that your protagonist starts as a dipshit, like just does not know anything and has to get smarter, has to learn these things. And so not only is that really effective for the player and having to learn all this stuff, but like you also get to really like it pushes you towards these things. Like another way to level up your eloquence is to go debate. So we haven't even talked about like the story broad setup here, is that like you are in the middle of a race for the throne. Like the king is dead and you are trying to be one of the candidates who succeeds the throne and takes the seat. Now there are some very particular nuances to that, but like broadly that is the overarching plot, is that you are caught up in the race while also dealing with like this evil dude who's like a mixture of, I don't know, Sephiroth and Luca Blight, named Louise.
He's very Luca Blight.
Very Seymour in some ways.
I could see Seymour as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, Seymour is a good comparison.
Yeah. Let's say like 30% Sephiroth, 40% Luca Blight, and then like 20% Seymour, and then maybe like 10% somebody else. But yeah. But you're doing all this, but then when you zoom back down to the day by day, it's like, okay, I got to get my eloquence up. I'm going to go debate a candidate on the podium in the town. And you get put up against these comical, like, I'm sorry, some of them are just absolutely funny, because they're basically, most of the candidates outside of like the really big story ones are like single issue candidates. And so there's one dude that's just like, I'm old. I think the youngins should take care of all the oldens. You better pay, lots of taxes to keep me happy because I'm old and I've earned it. And you have to like debate him, or you have to debate the cute little Yugi who just wants to like give gauntlet runners to everybody. And she's got some points, but
so cute.
I think it's cool that all of these things that in other games, in not just the game that we're trying not to say, but mini games, like they would be the thing that just bumps your stat up. Like, oh, Tokimeki Memorial, you focused on sports this week, so your sports leveled up. Good job. But like here, they use it as an opportunity for just a little bit of storytelling or a little bit of role playing, where they're like, okay, you have to rebut their argument. Here's 3 options. Which one do you think is going to sway the crowd to why their position is not tenable for the crown? And like, that's so good. It's so well done and exactly the kind of thing I love to see Atlas doing.
I haven't gotten to that part. That sounds really awesome, though.
Yeah, I actually upped my eloquence by debating with the cat guy who's the fisher. He just holds like that fishing spear, and he's like, "I'm going to give beer to everyone." Loveless.
I love Loveless.
So great. And every time I see him, I compliment him, and it pisses him off, which is even better.
He just wants to party and fuck.
He just wants to party and fuck.
Every time I see him, I'm like, hell yeah, bro. You get it.
It's like, dude, I agree with you, but I got to get the story going.
You ain't winning shit, but I support you, dog.
What a game to release on an election year. Yeah. Go ahead,
It's
Nadia.
very, very topical. I'll say that much. Like, I feel like that's probably the major benefit this game has over other games that are in its vein, because it's definitely a more, how do I put this? Not like a more mature, down to earth story. Like, it doesn't have much of the juvenile shenanigans that you had so much in other games that start with P and rhyme with Plasona. Yes, Michael gave me the eye.
No,
we're
not letting you get away with that.
Okay, but the point is, like, I find myself so much more engaged in this story. Like, I love Persona 5. Don't get me wrong, but I don't care if I'm saying the name now. I will die for this, because I am so glad I don't have to read text messages anymore. It's just like every day you wake up, oh god, Ryuji won't shut up.
Oh my god, all the text messages in Persona 5. You're really bringing me back.
It fits the vibe.
I'm really glad that I don't have to deal with that in Persona 3 Reload.
It fits the vibe there, honestly. Though. Like I think
it
that
does.
is.
Like, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I just find that metaphor feels more, even though it kind of has that, definitely the structure of Atlas games, not just the forbidden games that we cannot name, but like Shin Megami Tensei. It feels like an integrated world. I love the fact, like, it does have that modular kind of setup, but they have ways to make it feel so much more organic. Like, for example, I just completed, I'll say this without, like, doing too many spoilers. I'm about to attend a soiree, and I have time to just, like, goof around. So I'm going to a tower, because some guy asked me to go on a quest, beat up some ogre, and get the horn, and I'll get $1 billion or whatever. So this is like, this is still a timed journey. This is still days counting down, but you spend that time talking to other characters as you travel on the road. You spend that time, like, just kind of doing stuff around the Gauntlet Runner. I actually found Hazume's stories he wrote about his son in the bookshelf. And I'm like, oh my god. So I'm like reading that, and he's talking about fatherhood, and like doing that, like, brings your, as you said, Eric, brings your tolerance up. So you never feel like you're wasting time. And sometimes when you're when I was on the quest to this tower, I ran into so many problems. Like, number one, some bird was being an asshole, so I had to beat up the bird. And then I meet little Eugene, the little tiny thing who wants to steal my Gauntlet Runner, because she, buddy, my father's poor or whatever. And so I had to fight her. I had to fight what's her name? Pink dog.
Katharina. Katharina. Yeah.
She hasn't joined me yet. I'm pretty sure she's on the verge of joining me, but I went through all that plus the campfire scenes, and then I got to the tower. And I'm just kind of going through that, and that has like the regular kind of rules as you would expect from other dungeons and whatnot in by Atlas. But I spent 3 days, but they weren't wasted, like they were all kind of clumped into a big like log of content. I'm sorry, that's a really bad metaphor. It's the best I could do on my salary. So you go through that stream of content, and you feel good at the end of it, and then you return like, that took up 3 days, but I really feel like I got a whole bunch done. And it makes the game feel like I am going through a fantasy world. I am traveling through this fantasy world and living through it, even though it is still technically modular.
They do some really smart stuff too with how you're able to manage that time and what you can use during it. And
Yes.
again, they find ways to tie stuff in because, like, for example, in the area you're in, I think you eventually unlock the bath that you can use at night.
I already have the bath. Yeah.
And you can get bath salts. And you can like put bath salts in the tub to basically like spend a nighttime slot bathing to get stat ups. And so I was bathing like crazy. I'm serious. Like I almost ended this game with 100 magic. It felt awesome.
Oh my god. That sounds really breakable.
Yeah. It made the end of the game a little bit more of a time crunch to get all the bonds and stuff done. But look, early game, I was bathing like crazy. But the bath salts, like the really good ones, you can only get them from towns that you find while like traveling the world. And then there are also vistas, like these gorgeous like viewpoints that you can get to where you just see out into the world and you see this like amazing sight, and the game just kind of like pauses and lets you sit there. I put one in the review on the Blood God site, like one of the first ones you run into, because it's just so good. And it's this moment where your party members just kind of talk amongst themselves about what they're seeing and the world. And then Poe knocks my soda over, and then you get like a little bit of wisdom. But yeah, to your point, Nadia, it's everything is connected, everything is building up, everything is giving you stuff, but it also doesn't feel like you're just getting numbers. Like it also ties into this broader like vibe of you are on a fantasy journey. I think one of the little things that this game does that I absolutely love is that you can get equipment from a dungeon and bring it back to have it purified or appraised, which is such an underrated RPG mechanic. I love that when you like pick up this rusty sword and you're like, what if it's like secretly Excalibur? That would be awesome. And it feels really cool when you go back and you're like, oh, this is actually way better than any of the stuff I could buy or pick up in the dungeon. And I was rewarded for taking that extra step. And sometimes you get crap, like that's fine. Sometimes you polish it off as just a normal sword and you sell it and it goes towards buying your potions or whatever. But
there's actually a really clever moment like that too. Like again, if you don't go on these miniature quests, it's not a big deal, but you might miss out on like a little side pocket of content. For example, the informant told me about some poor town where it's like, oh yeah, you might not think that they're selling anything good, but take a closer look. So you go to this poor ass town and you buy, like, they have a bunch of rusted weapons you can buy and you bring them back and they're really good weapons. So taking that initiative to go off the road for a moment, it might take you some time, but you really are rewarded for just kind of whatever you do. You never feel like you're, oh god, I'm on the wrong path. Like you could sometimes feel with other Atlas games.
Talking to NPCs
I really like
is
about
so
Metaphor is that it's a really complex game, and I felt pretty overwhelmed when they were doing their marketing blitz over the summer.
Yeah, I felt a little bit like that too.
They were just dropping so many mechanics and so much world building on me. Hashino was doing all of these different deep dive talks about this game I hadn't played and had really no context for. And so that was one of the reasons I think some people were worried about Metaphor ReFantazio, was that not only was the name a bit of a mouthful, let's be totally honest, but it was hard to imagine what this game was like on a moment-to-moment basis. But like so many of the best RPGs, I think Metaphor does a really good job of bringing you right away, grounding you in its world, grounding you in its fairly complicated mechanics, especially the archetypes and such, and kind of giving you an idea, kind of holding your hand a little bit, but also letting you go free. There was never a point where I was like, get on with it. I actually think it's kind of more smartly paced than Persona 5. I'm sorry, I'm canceled now. I apologize. I already said Persona a few other times as well, but I think it does a really good job of grounding you in its mechanics and its world right away. And I just love that in the early going, there's a reason for you to go, wow, a big ugly head, to coin the term from The Simpsons. It really it establishes its stakes and the main thrust of the story really early on. My question for the panel is, I mentioned that this game comes out in an interesting time, comes out in an election year here in the US. Persona 5, sorry, I'm in trouble again, really liked to. It had a lot of politics in it as well, and but there were times where people thought that Persona 5 was less than successful in how it articulated its different positions or showed how politics kind of connected up with Persona 5. In your opinion, I'm interested in what Michael has to say about this one. Does Metaphor succeed where Persona 5 didn't succeed as much?
I feel like P5 was tried. It bit off a lot, and sometimes more than it could chew. It tried to tackle like it was kind of like every month was like the like villain of the month or whatever, and it was about a different aspect of the world. So I do think they're very different in how they approach talking about those things. I think Persona is able to, or P5 was able to, kind of touch on different things to varying degrees of success, of course, as I said previously. So I think it's like, let us show you how fucked up this is in the context of a modern world. And a lot of stuff was moving to me, and it ended up tying together in a way that I thought was good. But for Metaphor has, like, as I say in my review, Metaphor has like this clarity of vision. Like I felt like instead of like, oh, we need to talk about this, we need to talk about this, we need to talk about this, and we need to find a way to tie it all together.
It's like grab bag of issues.
Yeah, it's more like, what is our main thesis? What are we trying to say? What is the ethos that is going to drive this world? Okay, we need to incorporate these different things, and we're going to have characters be vessels for that, and not just like move from one thing to another, but have them constantly feed into each other every step of the way. So I think there are a couple ways in which they do this really well, and I think one of them is Luis as the villain, because he's like a very consistent character. He is there from the start, and he is there throughout. And your relationship with him you have a really funny relationship with Luis as the villain, because he's not like a bad guy out in the distance. Like, okay, by hour 80, we're gonna get to the fight with him. No, he's a candidate alongside you. He is the front runner in many ways, and he's enigmatic. Like he's charismatic, and he's compelling. Like, he's wrong.
The evil incumbent.
yeah, and when he like does these big speeches, it's like, I know you're up to something. You're saying the right things, and I know why people are moved by you. But I know you're up to something. It's so compelling.
His big thing is that, like, this is a world where races are extremely divided, and there are just like, if you're a certain race or certain races, you cannot move forward in life. And Louise
literally go into a shop and they won't serve you, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Louise, like, he has two henchmen who are what's the name of the race? Paprius. Parapus. First of all, the little guy scares the crap out of me.
Fidelio. Yeah.
Fidelio, like, he's terrifying.
He's just a little guy.
He's a little guy.
He's just a little guy.
Do you know in that Simpsons bit where like they have the karate guys?
Yes.
Come on, this guy's gonna do something.
He's gonna
really cool.
do something cool.
But the point is, Louise has no issues with like mingling with anybody. The whole thing to him is power. If you can prove yourself, you can be alongside him. But as that whole power thing is kind of like, maybe this wouldn't really work as a position. But I like the fact you give everyone the opportunity to be in your company. So yeah, he's a very interesting villain. He's not boring. I'll give him that much. He's just, what are you up to? What is your joke? What is your job? Are you on to me? Am I on to you?
Yeah, and like having him as a vessel for, because he has that thing like, oh, like in like his first speech is like, race doesn't matter. We're breaking down all the barriers between classes and races. Don't you want that? All of you who have been like put down your entire life, now's your opportunity. And it's kind of like, oh shit. He's saying the right things, but you kind of have to go through the motions to explain why that isn't going to work. And so there's like this other layer to the game in which it's about how masses are moved by grand gestures that aren't as nuanced as you think. And I think the reason why Luis is so compelling to the rest of the people in that, like the masses in that game, and why he's able to rise to be the top candidate throughout, is because he's able to rouse people's sentiments in that way. And there are bits and pieces of this game that kind of poke at the idea of how easy it is for authoritative figures like him to move people emotionally. So you start to like understand, why people are so they gravitate towards these authority figures. Like people say that they want, free will, or they want to like be good. They want a world in which everyone can thrive. But like, no, what they really, part of it is that what they really want is someone to tell them, someone to dictate their world, to like be a powerful figure, and like that's the person that we can rely on. We're going to put all of our anxieties and fears, which is a big thing. It's like we're going to placate that and put that onto somebody else. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on authority figures to like figure that out. So if you have someone like Luis in power, it's like, oh cool, like that's my guy. Like
one thing we're kind of like glossing over here also is that he can say power, 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 because we have like Hieronymus Bosch paintings that have come to life and are attacking the world.
The humans.
So people, of course, the humans. The first time I saw that, like, oh, a human, I'm like, oh god, here we go. Oh shit, what is that? So yeah,
I love how I love the designs of these things and how absolutely bizarre they are in the context of this world. If nothing else, they're consistently distinct. Here's another question that I have for the group. It's still early, but just based on early returns and the buzz around this game after the first week, does this have a chance to dethrone Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as the most significant JRPG of 2024? And more importantly, has Atlus's RPGs dethroned Final Fantasy as the biggest and most important JRPG out there right now?
I was having this conversation with somebody, like, I think literally last night or the night before, where there's definitely a lot of talk, as there always is this time of year, about what's GOATY, what's going to be GOATY and stuff like that. And
what's the GOATY? The GOATY.
And I do think Rebirth was kind of a presumptive candidate for a long time. To use Metaphor's own example, Rebirth was maybe like a Sanctifex Fortin, where it's like, this is the candidate that everybody kind of expects is going to come in here and be like a big presence. And Metaphor is a dark horse candidate, I think. I don't think that's like crazy out of pocket to say, because even though it's got Atlus behind it, even though it's got the history of certain RPG franchises and all that behind it, it is a new IP. It's got to trade on its own name as much as it does on others, and you can put a lot of those names behind it and say over and over again that, like, hey, this is Fantasy Persona, this is the team that made all these games. Like, it's still got to be something new versus having Final Fantasy on the cover. But I do think it's kind of funny that we keep having this situation over and over again where we're like, could a CRPG be successful in this day and age? And then Baldur's Gate 3 comes along and is like, yes, it can be. It can do that stuff. Disco Elysium comes along and says that same thing. And so finally, like, turn-based RPGs have their moment where they're like, yes, see, like, that is what we were talking about. You can do it. Even Persona 5 was doing it in 2017. And now, like, a lot of the same creative vision comes back through and proves it again. Like, yes, you can do that. It can still work.
There's this huge bias against RPGs, and especially turn-based RPGs, in a lot of quarters of the games industry, in this idea of they can't be successful, they're too niche, they're too intellectual. Let's just make Fortnite again for the 100 billionth time. And then it seems like every freaking year, this RPG comes out of nowhere, and everybody goes, oh my god, this is like the biggest and most exciting game of the year. What's going on? I don't think that Metaphor is going to be Baldur's Gate 3 by any stretch of the imagination. I did worry that it was going to disappear early on, and that
I don't think it's going to.
It was going to fall between the cracks, that it wasn't going to get as much notice. I think it's really benefited from the fact that overall, even though there are a bunch of games coming out right now, it has a way, it's able to stand out against all of them, I think. And I think it's actually done a pretty good job of marketing itself. Just looking across the whole year, it's managed to stay relatively top of mind. It got the base, the core audience really buzzing about it from an early stage. And then the word of mouth has been extremely strong. And I think more than ever, people tend to discount reviews, but I think that having mid reviews is a poison pill, and having really exceptional reviews can really elevate you. And Metaphor has been getting exceptional, outstanding word of mouth. And then don't discount the fact that games like Honkai Star Rail have just straight up lifted this concept. So there's a huge audience of fans who are already kind of settled into this style of turn-based strategy, of this style of character, of this style of world. And so Metaphor instantly speaks to them, I think.
So one thing I want to point out too is that not only is this appealing to old heads who love turn-based RPGs and all that kind of stuff, even old heads in terms of people who are like, you know, playing Persona 5, Persona 4, Persona 3 when they were popular, like P3 Reload especially caught on with a younger crowd, caught on with like a Zoomer crowd. Like Michael, you know, like,
yeah,
TikTok has been overflowing with like Persona love over the last year from P3 Reload.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's so many.
It is wild.
Oh, Zoomers.
There are so many edits that use Persona music. There are so many like cuts that use
cool.
that stuff. Yeah,
it's
like
cool.
P3 Reload is like undeniably cool. And so literally going into launch week for Metaphor, a bunch of my feed was just like people going, oh, Metaphor's so hype, listen to this battle music where there's like this epic
battle
song.
music's insane.
And then this dude in the back
whips.
He did the Mass Destruction song too in Persona 3. That's what I read.
So someone was joking that was like Lotus Juice's ancestor or something that was doing the battle music.
Lotus Mead.
Lotus Mead.
Nice.
Like already that has so much going for it, and I think like once the game is out and it's going, like we remember Fire Emblem Three Houses, right? Like those characters took on a life of their own. Baldur's Gate 3, those characters took on a life of their own. I'm gonna tell you that the Metaphor party has 0 misses in it. Every single one of those characters is incredibly good. All the ones that you recruit throughout the entire time, there are no duds, there are no misses. I love all of them. And even a lot of like the sub characters are really compelling. The Bond characters, the important NPCs, the candidates, they're all great. And I think it's going to really take on a life with that, because again, we've seen time and time again, you take an RPG and you put really good characters in it and a really compelling world and a story and vibe, and it's going to have a life long after the launch date. And I'm not saying FF7 doesn't have that, but like Metaphor does have a like more potent version of that. I think I've seen some like Final Fantasy 7, you know, like post-launch love and stuff like that, but it feels like it comes from a place of nostalgia. It feels like it comes from a lot of people who love these characters already.
I think there's been a lot of negativity around Rebirth. There are definitely the mega defenders, but whenever Rebirth comes out, I think a lot of the conversation tends to center on one of two things. It's pacing / overstuffed open world, and how it kind of underperformed against expectations, and what's going to happen next in the trilogy. And maybe these are the bubbles and the circles that I travel in. But I think that the reception to Metaphor has been really exceptionally positive, and the reception to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in many respects has been more mixed, as people kind of focus on how do they feel about the ending? How do they feel about the pacing in the open world? Is this game ultimately a letdown, or is it a lot more successful than people give it credit for? So I think that there's a lot more
these games in the first place. I don't really understand why they're so different.
They're the two big JRPGs of 2024.
I would say that I would say that they're the front runners for Game of the Year for many people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna say I'm probably gonna end up liking Metaphor better. I still love my time with FF7. It's so weird that like people are like either or. I don't understand.
I think in the conversation of like who's gonna like win Best RPG of the Year or who's gonna win Game of the Year, but also
no other RPGs other than Final Fantasy VII.
We have Dragon Age coming up.
There's a lot of JRPGs that came out this year, but I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is definitely been the biggest and has very much dominated a lot of the discourse for a good chunk of the year.
Yeah, and I think
I've been on Blue Sky and just haven't really seen a lot of at least not bad discourse about it.
Well, I think part of it is also that up to this point, Rebirth had been like presumably like I said, the front runner for Game of the Year, and it felt like looking at the rest of it, like, oh, maybe Dragon Age can overtake it in terms of just like.
Do people really go around all year saying to themselves, "This is my Game of the Year," and nothing else?
This is what the reason why I say this is because
what is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth supposed to do against February versus October?
This is why I'm saying this is because like even at IGN when we do fan polls, Rebirth is just like consistently like the fan favorite. So that's the game that everyone when they look at this year.
The IGN sphere, I have to say, that's a very different sphere from what I lurk in, and what I don't know. Eric,
well, I mean, like this is the audience. This is our audience. This is like the IGN audience is gravitating towards Rebirth as their favorite game of the year. Of course, it's not the big.
We structure a lot of our year around Game of the Year kind of conversations and award show conversations
because I haven't really been
for
in
posterity,
that space.
we look back on individual years and say these were the big games that came out and were really defining. People talk about 2017. Why? Because some of the greatest games of all time, including Persona 5 and Breath of the Wild, came out during that time.
I am so sick of this discourse. I am so sick of the fact Twitter has been ruined by people who, even though like Sony and Xbox are practically jerking themselves off on stage, jerking each other off on stage. There's this big fucking console war, big fucking conspiracies against games journalists. You favor Sony. You're a Xbox. I like video games. I don't really. I like Nintendo best, sure, but I don't have this bias. I don't go around thinking I had that bullshit when I was like Sega versus Nintendo. Oh my god, I grew up and realized it was all bullshit. It's bullshit, people. Stop it. Stop comparing your games. Just play your goddamn games, please. Play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's a great game. Play Metaphor. It's a great game. What do they have to do with each other? I don't know, but apparently the algorithm has some fucking idea. Sorry, thank you.
Nadia, I love you so much.
Let's get the TikTok camera on.
The whole thing.
Somebody clip that and put it on TikTok right now. Put a good backing track to it right now.
Yeah, put like the Halo Reach music behind it or something.
I'll tell you who should be up on that platform, on that face that's in the sky. It should be me. Talking about video game wars. I'm gonna get rid of video game wars.
Just a big face coming out of the rock being like, shut the fuck up and play video games.
Everyone shut the fuck up. But anyway, the answer is going to be Dragon Quest 3 HD.
I agree with you.
So everybody, just enjoy your video games now. No need to have discourse around them. It's all good.
I agree with you though, Nadia, because I mean, even like the GOTY discourse feels like it's a poisoned well at this point because half of it's caught up in like, oh well, actually Wukong's the best game, actually Stellar Blade's the best game, and stuff like that. I think
there's a difference between comparing games and then like. Yeah, the discourse has been poisoned by bad actors. That really sucks. It impacts every single sphere of the games industry now.
Yeah, it seeps into everything. So it's really difficult to have these conversations because I do think there's something to saying like Rebirth, for example, Rebirth and Metaphor have similar run times. I would say maybe like Rebirth is like a hair longer. I would say Metaphor is like a 70-hour game and Rebirth is like an 80-hour game or something like that. But like thinking about what they do with their pacing or doing that sort of comparison is absolutely something. But then when it does turn into like, okay, well, you gotta shoot one.
Exactly.
I think it's totally valid to have a referendum on the success or failure of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but against Metaphor, it's just so weird. Like I don't know.
It's also. I think it depends on where you come at it, because like we're not being like, no, Metaphor, that's the one you play. I'm picking a side in this war. It's more like let's dissect what they do differently and how they're successful in the ways that they do things differently and the way they approach things. Where Atlas is an iterative game that is lower budget, where Final Fantasy is big budget, and it does all these other things that grabs at nostalgia. It's like interesting to dissect what they do differently, how successful they are, and ultimately, like, I'm not invested in GOTY discussions. I kind of sit back and just like, I find them interesting, I find them compelling, but I think that speaks to like the discussion of a top 10 list or what the best games of the year, whatever. It's fun to listen to that. What's not fun is listening to Xbox fanboys argue with PlayStation fanboys. That's not fun.
Yeah,
what's fun
boring.
is how various like podcasts and websites, how they do their comparison. What do they value in their games, and how do they compare games, and who's championing what, and what is the discussion behind that? Like, there's nuance to that conversation as opposed to like arguing with platform holders. Like there's no nuance there.
It just triggered me because like they were just talking about Final Fantasy VII in like these kind of absolute terms versus metaphor, and it just kind of got to me.
Sure, okay.
And you're right. Discourse has been absolutely poisoned by Twitter. Like, for example, one of my favorite games, if you can call it this year, is Dawn Trail. I really adored Dawn Trail. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great new start to, the fact that we are finally going back to Eorzea and learning about its world. And it was so poisoned by people because of the whole Wook Lamont thing. And it's just, now you can't even think about this game without the poison as well. And it's like, that's why I'm mostly off Twitter now, because I just can't handle it. I just can't handle the absolutes. Everyone's talking absolutes these days, and it just drives me up.
Yeah, you're. I will say I've curtailed my Twitter use significantly, and Nadia, I'm a better person for it.
I'm a much better person for it.
I will even say the metaphor has a section near the end where it maybe even gets into some of this stuff about how like just poisonous mob mentality can lead to just moments of mass anxiety, mass like fear mongering, bad actors like causing stirs in ways that are like, having real consequences, or even just like broad bad consequences. Like, to bring it all the way back home to what Michael was talking about earlier, like Metaphor does really grapple with that stuff. And so it feels like a very pertinent game. It feels like a very like of its moment game. It's not like, I'm not going to say that its election is suddenly like, oh, there's parallels to our current election. Like I won't say that. I say it has parallels in the way that it deals with stuff that we still see echoed in our real life nowadays. It's actually a little bit deeper than just trying to like parody a single election or anything like that. I think it's a political game in the good way, in the really like solid way that it really tries to grapple with why these things happen. And that does like ring really true with me, because it's like, wow, Atlas finally like did that super well for me personally. Versus like, I do love FF7 Rebirth. I really like that game. It's probably going to be on my GOTY list. I think its action RPG combat is probably the best action RPG combat I've ever played. It's absolutely sublime. I love the way they made those characters play and all that. But a lot of it does feel very nostalgic, very rosy, almost like half of it is kind of teasing like, oh, are we gonna do the thing, what's gonna happen, like that bit in Hot Tub Time Machine with the dude who's gonna get his arm cut off at some point. You don't know when it's gonna happen, like, oh, it could happen now. But like,
I forgot about that.
And the other half is like very just rosily nostalgic in a way that I do love, but it is very looking back. And Metaphor almost feels like it's looking forward. I feel like there's a future in Metaphor where I'm like excited about what Atlas could continue to do with this, what Atlas could continue to make. And it feels very fresh and new in a lot of those ways, even when it is looking back at a lot of very like long held RPG tenets that have been held over the years. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I know where you're coming from there. That makes sense.
Well, let's move off the discourse.
Oh.
And final thoughts on Metaphor before we move on?
I guess the one thing, I've talked about this game a lot in various capacities at this point, but the one thing that always gets me, there are moments in this game that really fucking got me. The way this game speaks to you as the player is probably one of the most powerful things I've felt in a game. And they open with that. The game opens with like, look at this utopia. Isn't this interesting? You, the player, what's your name, by the way? And I'm like, oh, me? And then the game says like, you're not naming the protagonist, you're naming yourself. And then
that.
so it plays with that in small ways. So it does so in very unpredictable ways, but it is very moving. It is very moving the way they use this, and I think that is one of my favorite things about this game, more so, or just as much as the statements that it makes, the characters that it builds, the things that you do in exploring this fantasy world, the road trip vibe. All of it feeds into this. All of it feeds into each other, and then you kind of there's an extra layer to it all that is some of my favorite storytelling I've experienced in a very long time.
I really like that the developers said that the menus are apparently really annoying to do.
Mm-hmm. they're so gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really beautiful. And I've talked to other devs who are like, wow, those menus are so cool. They really go all out on them. They're super. It's a really joyful game to play, and I play a lot of games, and a lot of games don't hit with me right away, and this one is really special right out of the gate, and I can't wait to talk a lot more about it. Any other thoughts, Eric, Nadia?
Yeah, I'll just say that, like, I said a lot of it earlier right at the start, and I'll say it again. Like, I just really love this game. I think it is an absolutely fantastic, like, in some ways, return to a classic style of RPG, but also, like, a show of what can be done in the future. I think that they've really built, like, Atlas has really built a third pillar here. Like, they have something really strong, and it's really cool to feel like when we were playing it in the early review period, there were several moments where I was like, they did it. Like, they did the thing, and it's so exciting to see a company just nail that vision and nail that identity and know that you're, like, seeing stuff that we're going to be talking about for the next 5-10 years. And to Michael's point, we can't talk too much about some of, like, the broader themes because of how, involved they get with story developments and stuff like that. But I think the way it envisions a world, if you like world building in your games, if you like a robust fantasy that's really thought out a lot of different parts of what this world is and lets you engage with so many of them, it is such an incredible adventure. They really built something amazing with that, and these characters, this story, this fantasy is something that's definitely going to stick with me for a while. So
yeah, for me it really feels like Atlas grew up with this one. Like, it is a good feeling. It's like watching FromSoft grow up in the same way. Just and Monolith Soft as well. Just kind of realizing, like, oh, okay, they've really learned how to seize what they have and make the best thing out of it. Like, I had to say to myself, could a game be as stylish as Persona 5 without wearing out its welcome and doing what we've seen already? The answer is yes. Like, we were talking about the menus. Like, it has been done, but it's being done again, and it's just done so well. It's yeah, they got something going here. Those Atlas kids, crazy kids, they're doing all right for themselves.
Oh,
they sure are, and hopefully Metaphor ReFantazio continues on. It's off to a really great start, and it's a really positive story, and it's been kind of a weird 2024.
Can I make one last note real quick? It is an insane 2024 for Sega Atlas specifically, and when it comes to RPGs, because like we're talking P3 Reload, Infinite Wealth, Unicorn Overlord, and Metaphor. Like
SMT5 Vengeance,
SMT5 Vengeance as well. Yeah, like,
Vengeance is great.
Like, obviously, like, developed by different teams and stuff like that, but what an incredible run for a single publisher in a single year. Like, that is amazing.
What did we call the Square Enix Shotgun Blast, or
the Blunderbuss?
The Blunderbuss.
The Blunderbuss.
It's like a blunderbuss, but good.
No, this is like the headshots of 2024.
Snipers.
All right, that's it for our Metaphor ReFantazio review, but I'm sure we'll have plenty more to say about this game as we continue on for the rest of the year. Okay, time now for a series of random encounters. Nintendo unveiled Alarmo over the past week, and of course it immediately became a hit because Nintendo. Also, Switch Online is running a mysterious playtest. We'll know more about it on October 20th. Dreamhaven revealed its first game, a tabletop-inspired tactics RPG called Sunderfolk that you can play with friends. And this looks like a lot of fun, and I would absolutely love to be playing this one with the Blood God crew.
Hell yeah.
2 Disco Elysium successors were announced this week. One is Night Shift, a detective RPG. The other is from a group called Summer Eternal. Notably, the Summer Eternal group says that they are not making a Disco Elysium successor, but they're still explicitly reference it. There's so much beef happening between all of these different studios. It's really hard to unpack. This is on top of a studio called Long Do, which already exists. Zaum still exists. And meanwhile, lead writer, designer Robert Kurvitz and art director Alexander Rostov are making their own game at his studio backed by NetEase. So the entire band is off doing their own solo projects right now.
Yeah, they're kind of mad at each other.
Yeah.
Anthrax Beast there's 4 studios now. It's wild. There's like 5 studios. It's actually kind of crazy. Genshin Impact's latest update isn't fully voiced in English due to the SAG-AFTRA strikes. Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred arrived. It had a rocky launch because it wasn't able to release right away, but apparently it's doing better now. Bethesda says its Starfield is still focused on fan concerns as Shattered Space falls into mostly negative territory on Steam. Yeah. Pathologic, the acclaimed horror game that I recall Eric really liking, is that right? Is getting a 3rd installment, this time with time travel?
It's getting, I think it's called Pathologic 2. No, it is Pathologic 3. Yeah, it's weird. The way it works, from what I can tell, is that you are still doing Pathologic, but there is some sort of weird timeline stuff happening where you can rewind and stuff like that, and also like incorporation of more management and like illness elements, like dealing with the actual pathogen itself. So I'm really curious to see how that pans out. Ice Pick is a thorny situation all around, but I do really like a lot of that game. It's obviously a favorite amongst people who like weird off the path games. So curious is what I'll say. Curious about this.
We've seen Fallout London. Now fans are working on Fallout Nuevo Mexico, which is set in Mexico City, which is pretty cool. And finally, Dragon Age the Veilguard won't have an arachnophobia mode because it doesn't have spiders. But now, spoilers. But let's head into a boss battle. This week we had the Pokemon Giga Leak. Another Giga Leak. A roughly 1 terabyte leak that includes source code for Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Black 2, and White 2. Various other projects, a lot of Pokemon ZA info, a lot of beta designs, environments, and historical meetings around Gen 3 and Gen 4. Apparently the codename of Switch 2 was revealed, along with the 10th generation Pokemon game. Spoiler alert, they're making new Pokemon games.
Oh my god.
Emailed meeting summaries of Pokemon lore info, including the canonical origin of the Pokemon universe. Pokemon Company has acknowledged that the leaks are real. Thoughts on how damaging is this leak for Pokemon? Is there any real meaning to be pulled from this? It sucks that I call it the leak. It's actually a hack. All of this info was stolen out of a dev portal, but it strikes me as very painful overall for Game Freak in particular.
This is not good for Game Freak because Pokemon fans are already some of the angriest people on the internet. And they are absolutely going to pick apart everything that's there and compare it to what's coming and what's been, and they're just not going to let themselves have any fun whatsoever about it. They're going to be angry and worked up.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to like affect like the success of Game Freak or the future games. I don't think it's going to do that. But it is making it a lot more difficult to operate in that space, I can imagine. Not that they like super engage with whatever discourse that we see. It's just like, you know, there are certain things that are not for us to see or for us to know. Like, like fuck corporations, but at the same time, you know, it's the same thing. It was like, if I agree to an embargo, I'm not going to be like, yeah, well, I don't know, this company is bad, so I'm gonna share all this information and break them. It's like, that's not really, you know, people are owed privacy. Like,
not easy common sense.
Yeah, it's like whatever they talk, like whatever, have your meetings, whatever the origin story is, like that's for them to have. That's not for us to be privy to. But like when you start to like do shit like this, it's like, oh man, I really wish you could use your hacker skills to actually do something good for the world rather than leaking
there's a lot wrong.
Than like stealing information from Game Freak and the Pokemon Company. Like, that's what you're using your efforts for, but that's a separate discussion. It just gives more fuel for a rabid fan base to be even more obnoxious.
I'm gonna pose like 2 things. One of them is that like a lot of this info, I don't give a shit about leaks about upcoming games. They'll come out, they'll be made, they'll come out. I'm not looking at any of them. I don't care about them. Like, I do think part of the leaks, I'm always reminded of, like, there's so much cool info, whether it is this canonical origin of the Pokemon universe or other, like, just ways that things happen that are always, like, novel and interesting to people on the outside, right? Like, knowing how this stuff went down. Every time one of these leaks happens, it always comes with incredible insight into this stuff. And it does personally make me wish that we could be a little bit more open in the games industry about talking about development, talking about things and how they came together. And I do actually think Nintendo does a pretty okay job of that. With, they had Iwata Asks, obviously, but then they do a lot of, like, dev interviews and stuff like that. So I do think that that publisher is very good about it. But that benefit comes with the mass.
No. Eric.
Poe. Oh no.
Poe. Be good.
Oh, Poe destroy the microphone.
Poe, just
Bye, Poe.
podcast.
Okay,
Oh,
we're
no.
good. We're good. We're back.
Okay.
That benefit is massively outweighed by the fact that this leak obviously came about through, like, bad intentions. That this leak is a leak. It's not a controlled information distribution. You know, it's not even just that, like, oh, you know, they said it's okay or not okay. It's like the way that's presented. It's the way that it's handled. Like, it's being put forward in a way that is safe for everybody. And I think that's something that's really important to note, is that, like, Pokemon Company, Game Freak has, like, acknowledged this, and also says that, like, yeah, like, employee information is caught up in this. And, like, that is, historically, when this stuff has happened, like, you could talk about the altruistic ideals behind it, but it's never like a leak comes out and it's only, like, the okay stuff, quote unquote, to leak. It's always like, oh, here's some neat info about a game in development, and also, like, addresses and shit like that.
Yeah.
And, like, that's what really frustrates me, is because as somebody who wants more clarity and transparency, and, you know, I am curious about this stuff. I kind of wish there was a statute of limitations that once, you know, a developer got X number of years out from their game, that they started just putting out dev documents and stuff like that to say, like, this is all the cool behind the scenes stuff that we know.
Ports modems that devs would put out, back in the day.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Eric. I have really mixed feelings about this. Yeah, I have really mixed feelings about this, because for posterity, there's a lot of beta designs that are coming out. There's the meeting notes, frankly, are really fascinating. I hate that this was stolen from Game Freak, and that it sounds like identities are being compromised. It's a really problematic in a lot of different ways. And I kind of wish that Game Freak would just release a book with all of this stuff in it, actually, because there is it is kind of really interesting to peer behind the curtains from a historical standpoint, and be able to see what the conversations were around the development of Gen 4, Gen 5, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but,
Nintendo and Capcom do a lot of books like that.
Yeah,
and they'd sell really, really well. I'd buy them.
Yeah, and it's a case of, like, I just hate that this is a thing that happens over and over again, that, like, our industry tends to be a pretty ripe subject for this kind of theft and ransomware and stuff like that. It sucks, because
it does,
like we said, I don't care about what, like, marketing campaign it makes more difficult. I care that it has, like, tangible effects on the people that have worked there, either present or past, or even future. And it sucks that this all gets caught up in that, over just being able to say, like, oh, I found out what the code name for the next Pokemon is, or something like that. Like, who gives a shit? Like, yeah, it's kind of fun. It's kind of novel to know that it's a wiki bullet point or something, but, like, is it worth all this? Absolutely not. Like, ugh.
We're, like, 1 year removed from the Insomniac leak, which itself
God.
was really damaging, and it seems like this happens at least once a year, and invariably the same thing happens. The leak comes out, and there are people on the one side going, wow, this really sucks for the studio. And there are journalists who are reporting on the facts of the leak. And then there are the people who are just tearing apart all the info gleefully and sharing it on Twitter, and stolen images and stolen assets and stolen information and timelines and details. And that part makes me feel a little gross.
I agree.
I'm being totally honest.
I think this is, again, like, I've been thinking about this because of a certain website that was zombified over the weekend. But it reminds me that, like, one of the important parts of having an establishment for media, having, like, the ability to train people up, to give people the skills, is that when it comes to this stuff, they're going to know how to handle it well. They're going to know how to pick through it. They're going to know how to find the interesting nuances, but they're also going to be able to contextualize and make sure that they're presenting the information in a way that feels like respectful and acknowledging of the fact that this is, like, news, but it's also, like, really difficult news that came about because of a bad situation. You have to report the news, but you also have to not mishandle the news. And the more we see sites go by the wayside, we see media fall by the wayside, how many people do we have left at the end of the day who can handle that stuff?
Right,
We're running out of sites, we're running out of chairs, and it's frustrating, and I don't want it to turn into a space where, like, the gaming space is just dominated by people who are just going to gleefully tear at this stuff like hyenas, you know? So
Truly. Well, let's roll into the tavern now and talk about what we've been playing, what we've been watching, what's been on our mind. Eric said that he wanted to talk about what's been going on with Waypoint. I'm happy to touch on that at least a little bit. It's a little bit weird. So Waypoint was happening around the same time as US Gamer, and I have to say that if US Gamer just got revived by a whole different group of people and they were claiming to carry on the legacy without the original people, I would not be feeling particularly great. So I have a lot of sympathy for...
I would find a way to smear dog poop on it. I'd just find a way. I'd find a way.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a how dare.
Yeah, it's like it feels like this is not your place to revive something that you were never. It could be. It's different because Waypoint is not just like a property like a GameSpot or IGN.
Right.
Yes, it was owned by Vice, but it is as close to a grassroots thing as you possibly could with a parent company. Obviously, with Austin and various folks, Patrick and Rob Zachney and.
Kato, Natalie,
Danica, yeah, like those are Waypoint. That's what Waypoint is. Even when like Danica moves on or Natalie moves on, or like even when Austin leaves, it's still like Waypoint is still being ran and dictated by the people who made it what it was. And then so for that, like Vice sucks, obviously, and they mishandled is a light way to put what happened at the end of Waypoint. So for like a year and a half later, I forgot how long it's been, but for them to be like, oh, we're spinning up the brand again, like what, why, how, and what makes you think this is going to work? The things that made Waypoint successful are they're no longer present. You're not going to get that back, because Waypoint wasn't a place that was like, you know. Places like IGN and GameSpot they're institutions. They run on things that will help them keep going into the future. Whereas Waypoint is so personality based, and so when you bring back the brand, you're bringing it back without any of the things that made it successful. And then I know what they're going to try and do. They're going to try to make it SEO churn. As much as they want to say that in the article, their announcement article, that we're going to fight against this SEO churn in media. It's
already like SEO.
It's like, sorry, yes, yeah, exactly. So it's like, sorry, but that's what Vice is going to ask you to do. I fucking know that they are, because we've been down this road many, many times before, and you're not going to like it. It's not going to be successful. And I hate to be like so negative on the outset, but there's a level of cynicism that we have as people who have operated media for a very long time, and we're not dumb.
No.
We've all been subject to these things time and time again. So it's it sucks, and I can imagine what it's like to be of the original Waypoint people. Like, yeah, they have Remap and it's successful in its own right, but to see that, just like, oh, sure, yeah, I guess you're gonna like dig up my old thing that I created and just like fucking turn it into something it was never supposed to be. So yeah, and it's. It's very different from, like, say, the way Giant Bomb continues its legacy, because Waypoint is it operates in the same space where the new people at Giant Bomb, obviously they're all my friends and I've been a part of it as well. That's like the blessing of the OGs, the handing of the torch of the OGs. Like we're bringing in a new era, and it is with the blessing that we are now moving on. But we're saying this is what Giant Bomb is now, and we are going to help support that as the ones who started it, as the ones who created it. We are endorsing this new era of it. Whereas like Waypoint, there's like, let's dig up the grave and give it to somebody else, and it doesn't work like that. It doesn't. That does not
those
work.
Bones.
So I don't want to necessarily like cause problems for the person who is behind. Like I get like media is tough out there, getting a job is tough out there. God knows I understand that. And don't take this as a reason to go name searching, finding someone on Twitter, getting mad at them or whatever. But I want to highlight like one passage that I think really emphasizes the issue that I have with all of this. From their blog, I want Waypoint's return to be like the Silent Hill 2 remake, which is already like, oh. I'm no genius.
I love it.
I'm no genius. I don't claim to know everything about the Wild West that is gaming in all its splendid forms, but I also adore gaming and cherish what Waypoint represented to believe I can lead the charge in making this real. Something chaotic without being crass, critical without being cruel, ambitious without being arrogant, and then, a little bit jump down a paragraph. Yeah. So how do you follow in the footsteps of greatness? One cautious, mindful step at a time. Now, I was lucky to get to publish a few freelance pieces on Waypoint in what I feel was one of its like heydays. I was lucky to work with the folks like Danielle and Austin to put stuff up there that I am still proud of to this day. You know what Waypoint never fucking was? It was not one cautious, mindful step. It was not fucking like ambitious without arrogant, critical without cruel, chaotic without crass. Like, the stuff I wrote for that was fairly tame compared to what other people wrote, but it was critical. It was like, it examined. It
took swings.
It was a log of where we are going and what our destination is in this gaming world. And everything I see from this is not just a misunderstanding of what Waypoint was as like an institution, as an organization, but what Waypoint was trying to do and what games coverage can look like. And all of it is just coming back to the idea of like, there's another line in here of, so here's my promise to you, I will do everything in my power to make Waypoint yours again. Who made it? Not ours. I'm that duck chasing people in the meme. Like, who did it? Say who did it. Like, there are people still waiting on their severance. There are people who made that site what it was, who were given the shortest end of the stick. And like, that is the frustration. There is this idea that not only are they bringing back Waypoint, which they're not, they can't bring back Waypoint without re-employing all those people and putting back, right, everything that was there before. And honestly, we have Waypoint back. It's Remap. Please go support Remap. But like, the idea that it's been taken away by forces unseen and we're going to return it to you. No, the forces were in the house the whole fucking time.
Yeah, the whole tone of that essay is so like kind of milquetoast and smarmy and corporate that I'm just like, oh, I know exactly what kind of person this guy is, and it's just, I know how the site's going to.
I don't want to make judgments like that.
That's fair.
People are trying to get work in this godforsaken industry as much as they possibly can. Seriously, but
that's fair.
I think that it's bringing up a lot of raw feelings, honestly, because Waypoint was beloved by an entire generation, and especially an entire generation kind of was inspired by Waypoint, Nadia, in the same way that we were inspired by OneUp.com once upon a time. And it, on the one hand, it should feel like a new publication in this day and age is worth celebrating, but it's not, because we're already seeing where this is kind of going, and it's sort of a depressing refraction of what was a really, 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 really great publication back in the day. And also, the original writers didn't get severance after they got laid off. That really sucks. I'm sorry. Vice Games. Maybe Vice, this is from a company that literally laid off its entire newsroom team without notice. And while they were laying out huge investigative reports in their CMS, they got laid off. Not great.
So they flipped the switch. You tried to
They
publish
flipped
it.
the
And
switch.
You're not here anymore.
Like,
Who are you?
They just
Get outta
turned
here.
off the CMS. They just turned it off.
That is so
And it's
disgusting.
like, and all the articles went away. Is stay in the media
What a
today.
bitchy thing to do.
Yeah.
Stay with the media. But moving on, Michael.
Hi.
Hi. You're done with Metaphor.
Oh man.
What's on your
yeah.
mind? What have you been playing?
I've been last night I had asked my friends via Discord. I don't know, Metaphor has been done. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I played a little game called Before Your Eyes, and friend of the show, Kenneth Shepard, had bought it for me months ago and has pestered me time and again to play it. And so I'm like, all right, sure, I'll give you 90 minutes and I'll play it. So I played Before Your Eyes with the webcam mechanics and everything, the blinking stuff. And it was really funny because I was like getting frustrated at myself. Like, fuck, I didn't realize I was blinking. Damn it. Shit, I blinked again. But yeah, it's I'm glad that I played it. It's very heavy in parts. I think it takes a little. It's 90 minutes long. You basically, for folks who don't know, I'm sure many of y'all know what it is, but it is a game in which you kind of see the life of this character that you are embodying, and there are scenes throughout the life as they grow up where you watch your parents in the house and you interact with various objects, and there's conversations that you're privy to. Parents arguing, talking to you, getting mad at you, being proud of you, going to school, meeting this friend, having neighbors, and connecting with various people, and like the trials and tribulations of life as a child, but also this thing about like life's passing, and how do you come to terms with maybe your life will be cut short, maybe you will lose a loved one, and how do you handle that? How do the people around you handle that? And these scenes go by through blinking. So it's this very powerful layer on top of just seeing an emotional story. So I highly recommend it because there are moments in which I struggle to connect with the game because I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like maybe I don't necessarily relate to this, but you don't have to relate to everything that you play, right? But I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And there are moments in which this game like really nails the feeling of like losing somebody and also like reflecting on that. And then there are twists in this game where it kind of like it like recontextualizes your understanding of what you were experiencing. And then there are moments in which I know what it was like to lay down on a hospital bed and like feel like your life was slipping through your fingers, or what it was like to be put under an MRI machine. And I was like, oh, this is very familiar. So it's I wouldn't say it's funny, but it's just like, interesting that this game kind of like really understands the heavy material it was working with. And there's some times when it feels like the whole thing is like, oh, you have kind of like, I guess in Asian communities we call it like having tiger parents, who are like, no, you're going to be a musician, you're going to be this, you're going to be that, and you have to spend all your time like being the best you can at this. So there's an element of like being a kid and wanting to break away from that, and then by the end of it you kind of have like this love and appreciation for your parents. That is like the journey of that game is childhood condensed in such a pure form, I think, and it is also very fucking heartbreaking. And so it just felt like I think it's a very good exercise that I think a lot of people should play, because it does give you a lot of perspective. I think that game embodies many things that I have already experienced. So a lot of the stuff wasn't new to me, but that's not to take away any of its power. And in many ways, I felt like as I was playing the game, like, oh, people who made this game, they understand me, or they understand what these things are like. So it was really nice to be like, oh, I'm not the only one who has thought these things or has experienced these things. So I think Before Your Eyes is it's a very special game, and it is, like I said, it only takes like 90 minutes of your time, and it is very effective, and it uses its time extremely well. So yeah, thank you, Ken.
Play it. It's so fucking good. Play it.
Yeah.
Michael, I'm really glad you're here because you reviewed Persona 3 Reload back in February. I've been doing a week-by-week playthrough, throughout the year. I've only provided the occasional scattershot update here and there, but while I was gone getting cigarettes in Richmond, I managed to I hit a really big story beat at the beginning of October.
Yeah, you did.
I did not know that this happened.
Oh.
This is one of those weird situations where somehow I managed to remain unspoiled on a particularly big plot beat for
Nice.
15 years, 20
Nice.
years.
Yeah.
Something
Wow.
like that.
Yeah.
It's
always fun when it
crazy.
happens.
That's good.
Boy, it really recontextualized a lot of how I felt about the cast, the individual characters, Ken, Shinji, Akihiko, the boys in general.
Oh,
I
yeah.
really like Akihiko. He's a great character.
Yeah, he is. That's my guy.
There's a really lovely scene, without getting into any spoilers, there's a really, really lovely scene with Akihiko in particular where he's having the yelling to God kind of scene moment and being reflective. And I love it when characters have those moments because they're very melodramatic, but I love melodrama. I love melodrama in games.
Yeah. Oh, P3R is it's a very good one.
Yeah.
I think I know what scene you're talking about. Is it with the medal
Metal.
and the trophies?
No, this is after the school assembly.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's a very different experience from Metaphor, and it's been disorienting to go from
It would be.
Persona 3 Reload to Metaphor back to Persona 3 Reload.
Yeah.
But they're both really cool in their own ways, and I love how I'm many hours into the game at this point, but it keeps I keep discovering more and more as I go along.
Yeah, that's cool. I know we mentioned this about Metaphor, but I think Persona 3 of all of the games in the series does its best where it doesn't feel like it's moving on from one story beat to another, because what I noticed when I played Reload is that all the party members are consistently involved with what is happening in the main story. So it doesn't feel like, hey, I'm going to tag along now because I have to, because I'm an RPG party member, and now we're dealing with things that are so detached from me. Persona 3 is consistently like tying everything into, this is everyone's struggle. Everyone is invested in this, what we're doing at the same level, and the characters consistently evolve. Like everyone evolves along with the story, so it doesn't feel as segmented as some of the other games in the series may feel. But I also, P3, as I've expressed them in many forums, many times, and in my review for Reload, is that it is the most like personally, emotionally raw story, and any other RPG. I personally, I feel like, so when people go on this journey, like I don't think everyone's going to connect with it, but when you do, it's like, oh, this is my favorite Persona. That's how I felt about it. But yeah, I hope you see it all the way through, because boy, the hits keep coming.
I'm now at a point where I don't necessarily have a lot to do at night because I've managed to get all of my stats, all of my academic stats to the top. So in some ways, I'm looking for things to do. But
wait, are they level 5 or are they level 6?
6.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Holy shit.
Yeah, everything's level 6 now.
Good on you. Yeah, hell yeah.
I spent a lot of time playing that trivia arcade game.
Oh, yeah.
In the arcade.
I love those.
Yeah. But so everything's level 6 now. And I'm not going to Tartarus every single night. But I love that there are the little vignettes that you can do where like I can go out and take Koromaru for a walk, or do some cooking with one of the characters, or help maintain my garden, or that kind of thing. And ever since this giant plot beat, it seems like the entire house is sort of down in the dumps, and I like that that's reflected in a lot of the little vignettes or character scenes where characters will be out with you, and it doesn't feel divorced from everything else that's happening in the game. The character will be like, yeah, hey, like, I'm really sorry. I've been really thinking about everything that's been happening, and I'm just really glad that we were able to take our mind off it with this particular thing. It doesn't feel dissonant from the overall arc of the story, and that makes me feel a lot closer to the overall cast.
Nice.
So
Yes,
I think it's really well done on Persona 3 Reload's part. And if you've never tried playing a Persona game week by week, you should really do it. It's a really special experience, I think. So I'm just now getting to another round of exams, so that means that pretty soon I'm not going to have a whole heck of a lot to do.
You're gonna ace them, and everyone will be your friend because you're cool.
Yeah, I'm already cool. I'm already the best.
Yeah,
of course.
So smart. I'm a genius level, super intelligent person. Wow,
Our
genius
child.
level, super intelligent person.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the Mitsuru social link going now that I'm a super genius, but she's never around. So annoying.
Yeah, she'll come around. So you're prepared. I found out that like a lot of people were like, oh my god, I can't wait to like start the social link with Mitsuru. Everyone loves her. And then they get there, it's like, you're not smart enough. Sorry. And they're like, oh fuck. Now I gotta like study every day.
Relatable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool to hear. It's cool to hear.
I've been bonding with both Yukari and Fuka at the same time. And enjoying both of their stories and like making them high prize so that I can get through both of them. And it is well documented on this podcast how I have a lot of very unlucky in love in RPGs.
You're bad at it. I'm sorry, Kat.
I'm really bad at it.
Roll back to the cousin clip. Just pull that one up.
But this time, Fuka and we're gonna do it. It's gonna be a great time. We're gonna date. Yes, this is all going to go very swimmingly.
Yep.
It's going to be great,
I
Kat.
have no problems whatsoever.
Yeah.
She's not going to be crying in the corner like with Chie. Be fine.
There was someone else he destroyed in another game. I can't remember who it was. It was like someone everyone loved.
I'm a heartbreaker. I
You really
am.
are, Kat.
Side note, I've been playing a lot of Diablo 4 again, and I actually do plan to get into Vessel of Hatred. I really enjoy playing as a rogue. It's been disorienting, though, because the mechanics keep changing underneath me, so I go in, I'm like, what? Where's the thing with the blacksmith that I can upgrade my weapons? Oh, no, they completely redid that system. Okay, that's really weird. Also, I'm aware, as the sole person who has anything nice to say about Starfield, I'm aware of the Shattered Space DLC being out. It's been getting kind of mid reviews, which disappointing, honestly, but I'll give it a good shot and see what I think of it. But they've really made a lot of improvements to Starfield that are sort of being discounted by a lot of people because it's very fashionable to hate on Starfield at the moment. Not that that game doesn't have legitimate gripes with it and everything, but I do want to play Shattered Space. I think it's I hope that it can live up to the kind of the legacy of Far Harbor and Point Lookout. Yeah, stuff like that. So, okay. Eric, you've been playing Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, ... comma.
Yeah. Wait. Is that what is that
semicolon,
Poe again? Yeah, okay, Poe got in there.
Poe has opinions.
So, real quick before I say that, shout outs to a game I did start like 2 days ago and I've only played like 2 hours of, but I do think it's really neat that this pod will like. Beloved Rapture on Steam is like a throwback turn-based RPG that is very old style, but doesn't have a lot of grinding. Very mid-length is what they advertise it as. It's also got LGBTQ themes in it, so have at it. I like the writing a lot so far. I think the battle system's really cool. It's got a really nice vibe. Reminds me a little bit of Chained Echoes in some ways from years past. So if you're looking for an indie RPG to support, go check out Beloved Rapture on Steam. It's neat. I'll probably have longer, fuller thoughts at some point in the future, but I wanted to shout that out on the pod. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is lit as hell. It's Budokai. It's back. It's, oh my god. I grew up playing the Budokai games, especially the first 2 ones. I played so much of those games. And so obviously, like when I was young and dumb, I would just, we'd sit there and like, okay, everybody power up to their highest form and then we'll fight, 20 minutes, no rush. And that was one thing. But Sparking Zero is not just like a revival of Budokai and all that, but it really does feel like it's riding the wave of a reignited Dragon Ball fandom that's been gradually surging for years now. Dragon Ball Fighters, I think, really gave it a boost. Super was doing okay, but I think like the movies and Daima are really exciting as well. Obviously, a lot of people have Dragon Ball in their mind right now because of Akira Toriyama, and I think a lot of things have just converged for this moment of just explosion of pure fan joy around how much of a love letter this thing is. And the crazy thing is they really seem to get a lot of artistic license with it, because it's not just, oh, we're gonna do the Frieza versus Goku fight where he goes Super Saiyan and they blow up a planet and it's all that kind of stuff, but there are like voice lines where Goten's like, Android 18, she's a baddie. And like Trunks and Goten talk like little zoomers and stuff like that, and they just got so much license to run with making these characters goofy, having fun with the idea that you can make a team of all Gokus and have the Gokus actually comment on it, but then like Turles is in the back, he's like, I'm not a Goku. It's like really goofy fun in the way that like a longtime Dragon Ball fan like me has. I've been loving it. It's been really, really great. And even just the single player offerings are fantastic. Like they have these episodes where you can do these what if scenarios. So like what if Goku didn't have to die to beat Raditz is a very early one. So you don't have to do the special beam cannon through the chest and all that. Grade 8 Vegeta has been absolutely just stomping people in the campaign, which is really fun. And it's all the memes around it are also incredible. Yajirobe is like a god for some reason because he can just pop senzu beans like crazy, and so it's like impossible to take him down.
What he probably smoke them.
Yeah, he's just constantly just like senzu bean. Chaozu, they made Chaozu have that thing where he just floats and moves around without moving at all. He's just almost like T-posing, just like floating around like that. And the funniest shit that people have been doing with this game, it's really, really fun. If you like Dragon Ball at all, I cannot recommend it enough. It's been a really good time, and the actual fighting is really good too. I feel like Budokai has always been in kind of a weird place where I feel like it took until maybe like Tenkaichi 3 for it to feel like it really knew what it was doing with how it wanted to handle fighting in that world. But Sparking Zero feels really good to play. It feels really solid for an arena fighter if you like that style of almost virtual on type movement and stuff like that. It's really solid for that, and really fun to mess around in. I was playing some matches with a friend of the show, Jesse Vitelli. We were having a really good time. So like I think this game is just an absolute love letter in the best ways, and can't recommend it enough if you like Dragon Ball.
One day we'll do a Super Robot Wars Pantheon episode, and you'll discover that Bandai Namco has been doing this kind of thing that they've done with Dragon Ball Sparking Zero since time immemorial, in which they seem to have a really good grasp of the history and the passion behind the individual licenses, and invariably layer in a huge amount of very specific lore, voice actor gags, giant what ifs, where what if this character met this character? Mm-hmm. What if Bright Noah slapped Shinji so hard that he became the biggest badass in the entire universe?
Yeah, I was just breaking the laws of gravity, and right there, I love that.
Exactly.
I think a slap from Bright Noah could fix me.
What if the Evangelion? What if Eva Unit 1 plugged its positron rifle into the wave motion gun from Space Battleship Yamato? What's gonna happen there? Just a lot of really delightful stuff, and so it's been fun to see that translated into Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and to see the reaction to it. And dang, like, it's been 25 years since the Toonami heyday of Dragon Ball Z, but that franchise feels bigger than ever. It's actually pretty wild how big it is.
Yeah,
on IGN.
It's fueled by Mexico alone.
It's just Dragon Ball Z is not going anywhere.
Love to see it.
It's incredible, and like I think it really speaks to how timeless these characters are, because I was replaying all these episodes and reliving all these fights and stuff, and even like the Ginyu Squad fight when Goku shows up after training forever and comes in and just like beats the crap out of half the Ginyu Squad, and you're like, oh, Goku's back, and like, oh, that moment still hits. And then obviously him going Super Saiyan in the fight against Frieza. I love the Namek saga so much, and like, oh, Dragon Ball's
I love
good.
the Android saga. That's my favorite.
Androids get
if I were to
really
watch
good.
one episode of Dragon Ball Z, what would it be?
Oh my god.
I'd probably go with a movie. Like, there's a couple of good movies.
I don't know if you could boil it down to one episode, but
is there one saga I should watch?
I would say maybe the androids into Cell, if you could like combine the two.
You know what you should do, actually, is go to YouTube, go to Mega64. They've done like the Cell saga in 5 minutes. It's the funniest fucking thing on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you don't really know it that well. So the effects are amazing.
So Rama 1/2 just got remade.
Yeah, that's right.
And I watched the first episode on Netflix, and I'm just like, yeah,
it's good.
This classic 80s and 90s anime coming back. I know that Sailor Moon got remade not too long ago, and I think the reaction to that one was a little more mixed. But it kind of made me go, oh, I want to watch some Sailor Moon. And so I was actually going through an abridged guide of being like, these are the essential episodes that'll get you through, because there's a lot of episodes of Sailor Moon out there, and a lot of episodes of Dragon Ball Z. So
there's Kai now, right? That like kind of shortens down Dragon Ball, so that should help. But like,
boy, that's confusing.
I do think like the Cell saga, especially the way it ends with Goku and Gohan. Gohan is like one of my favorite characters
Gohan's
in
great.
that
I love
series.
Gohan.
He's
a great guy.
It's like Gohan, Piccolo, and I also like Tien. I've always liked Tien. I don't know why, but Tien's pretty rad.
That's my husband yesterday. Like, what is it with Tien? He's actually a human who can kind of keep his own. Not like Yamcha.
He has a great part in the Cell saga where like they go off to train, and to keep Cell busy, he just keeps like blasting him with the same hit over and over and over again for like days, and it's the coolest shit. Like Tien, he's not a powerful dude, but he comes in clutch when you need him to.
He knows his limits, and he fights well within them. That's why he's smart. And
in one of the, I think it was Fusion Strike or Fusion something or whatever, one of the Dragon Ball games, he gets a fusion form with Yamcha, and they make Tiencha, and it's the funniest thing. God, I love Dragon Ball.
Oh,
Dragon Ball like the way Dragon Ball is able to like lean into how silly it all is what makes it work. And that's timeless. Like, anyone can jump into Dragon Ball and like immediately just fall in love with how hype it is, with how stupid it is, with how silly it is, but also how like its big moments are also emotional in a weird way. So I don't know. Dragon Ball is just like,
it's good.
It's perfect.
It's
perfect.
a staple. No matter how old you are, like, you always see like older people are like, oh, Goku's so cool. Kids are of course like, oh, Goku's so cool. It's just timeless.
The interactions between Gohan Future and Goku that you can get like voice lines in Sparking Zero are like absolutely heartbreaking. It's like really
stuck.
Yeah. Oh no. It's like I mean, okay, for
Give me
reasons.
One example.
So like Gohan Future is from like the bad future in the Android saga and stuff like that. So like there are,
that's bad.
If you can have voice lines between Goku and Gohan where Goku's like, I hate that this has like happened to you, my son. Like, I never wanted this for you. And Gohan's just like, I understand that, but like I have to carry forward. I'm just living your legacy that you taught me, Dad. And it's like, it like gut punches you a little bit. You're like, you're doing this, and then like a match later, Trunks is like talking Zoomer talk, and Vegeta's like, if you get a hit on my face, I'll take you to ice cream. It's like, oh my god, this series is incredible. I love
it's everything. It has everything.
Yeah, the one nitpick, and this is a thing I have with all Dragon Ball media constantly, is that I do think they did a better job of carrying in a lot of characters from the periphery in this one, and that includes a lot of like the women fighters in Dragon Ball. So you have Pan from GT in this, obviously like Kefla and components like Kale and Caulifla are in there too from Super. I really wish there'd been like a launch or a way to play as like Bulma or something. I don't understand why launch and Bulma always like don't show up on these because
Toriyama forgot that he made launch. Literally, he forgot that he made that character.
I kind of wish those characters would get a little bit of a spotlight because we're to the point where we're getting down to like there's literally like a Ginyu or like a Frieza Force soldier, just an unnamed nondescript dude in the roster, and they're showing up, but like named characters don't get the spotlight. Like, come on, like put them in there. They deserve to do a little bit of scrapping.
Bulma would be really good as like a gadget fighter,
A
like
capsule
a Zelda
character.
Fighter.
Yeah,
like it'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
Pokemon trainer.
Bulma Echoes of Wisdom.
And Nadia, we're running out of time, but did you have anything you were playing outside of Metaphor?
Oh, well, luckily I'm not playing much outside of Metaphor. I did shotgun a bunch of nuclear disaster YouTube stuff last week. I don't know why, but I learned a lot.
Threads is out on BBC, apparently.
What's out on BBC? Threads? Oh, of course. Oh.
Apparently it was a big deal that it came back. I didn't realize that it was kind of lost to history.
I thought it was on YouTube, to be honest, but I think maybe, there was some kind of hype around that. But, yeah, I read about the shoot. I don't remember exactly where it was. I think it was somewhere in Mexico where, unfortunately, a family got a hold of like a rod that was inside of an X-ray machine that should have been disposed of. They thought it was scrap. They opened it up. It was full of blue powder. The blue powder was cobalt, which is extremely, extremely poisonous radiation. That was a huge, huge mess. Like, yeah, I can go on about nuclear disasters. I don't know why, but they're interesting.
I was reading an article. I guess somebody wrote a book about this when Russia invaded Ukraine and briefly took over the Chernobyl. It was
Chernobyl, yeah.
Yeah, and kind of the consequences of that, and the people who were involved were like, "Hey, you're not in charge around here. This is a really sensitive thing," and how the soldiers started to feel like they were almost hostages to this situation because they could cause something really horrible if they weren't careful.
Don't play in the Chernobyl death zone. Actually,
don't play with nuclear power plants, kids.
There's a really interesting mutation going on with the dogs that live there. Something about how most of them get they have melanin in their fur, and a lot of them are dark or even just pure black, and they're trying to figure out how does that affect, because it's still like active radiation there. But the point is, humans are much more damaging to animals than irradiated wasteland, which is very sad. But yeah, these dogs are adapting. And they're trying to figure out why are animals like getting more melanin to combat this radioactive environment. So stuff like that is just very interesting to me. And I don't know if it's still true, but one major problem we have going on with Chernobyl is that for some reason a lot of the fungi and bacteria just haven't rebounded the way they're supposed to. So a lot of trees, a lot of foliage that should have been broken down years ago are still around. And if that catches fire, it's still irradiated. So
okay, yeah. I wasn't worried about the dogs are evolving, but I am worried about the fungi are evolving because that's how The Last of Us starts. So now I'm concerned. I think we should nuke Chernobyl. I think that would solve the problem. That cancels out. That's just basic math.
That's how it works. That's how
New Fallout fan mod incoming. They nuked Chernobyl again.
Stalker's coming out next month.
Yeah.
Is that a good series? I'd like to try that sometime.
Oh, I love Stalker. Stalker is wild.
I'd probably love it.
Big, fascinating backstory as well, because this was being developed by a Ukrainian studio that obviously has been in the midst of a war zone, but they're going to get this game out, which is numerous really fascinating gaming stories as well. The cartridges that is basically a perfect cartridge. Why can't I remember its name right now? It's actually kind of driving me crazy. This is great podcast content. FX packs. Sorry, I had to actually go look at one. The FX pack guy managed to flee the country, and he's like one of the only people who actually knows how to make those things. So there was a chance that if this guy had died or been drafted or something, that the literal knowledge of how to make these cartridges would have gone away.
Wow, good old war.
Yeah. On that note, Nadia, take us home.
Well, I guess I promised the serial killer story, didn't I? And this is very short. We were kind of talking about this in the pre-show. Basically, I'm trying to think of this, trying to remember this, but my parents like accidentally gave a ride to a guy who might have been a serial killer. This was, I'm not going to mention any names, but it's very vague. But this was a guy who was in the military and was apparently absolutely insane, killed people the way serial killers do. And before all of that came to light, my brother was with the Air Cadets, the Royal Canadian Air Cadets. He likes flying, so he got into it through that. And so my parents were kind of like Air Cadet parents. They would give rides to people. They would do this and that. And my brother used to train a lot up in the Trenton base in Ontario. And my parents were there for some reason, and they were asked, like, hey, can you give a ride back to Toronto to this guy? And it's just like this, might have been that guy, the big, very imposing military serial murderer. So apparently, according to my dad, my parents, he just sat in the back seat, just staring straight ahead with this look on his face. And it's exactly like The Simpsons, like when they picked up the hitchhiker. And Kat and I were referencing, what was it? Tiny Toons, My Summer Vacation.
Yeah,
they picked up the crazy. So
he did not like just bring out a giant chainsaw and start attacking in the back seat.
No, but my dad, who's a very like intuitive person and can kind of get a handle on people, is like, I was just so fucking scared. And when everything kind of came to light, he's like, oh, and this is just how I remember it. I could be missing details, but I'm pretty sure they gave a ride to a serial killer. My dad actually said he accidentally did that once before, not a serial killer, but when he was a kid, he picked up a hitchhiker near Millhaven's Maximum Security, which if you're a Canadian, you know the Tragically Hip song about Millhaven Maximum Security. And my dad's like, yeah, I think that guy was a guy who escaped because that happened. And gave him a ride. Don't stop at hitchhiking. It's really not a good idea.
If any family picked up a serial killer who happened to be hitchhiking, I would expect it would be your family.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
It'd probably be me.
And that's it for this week's episode of Acts of the Blood God. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you enjoy the work that we're putting out, please consider supporting Acts of the Blood God on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod. We also stream every Saturday or Sunday, in this case, at around 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Please subscribe to us on twitch.tv/bloodgodpod. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and subscribe to us on all of the YouTube channels. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything you want to promote?
Sure. You can find me in all of my bullshit at Michael PIM on Twitter. You can find me at Hi Michael on Instagram, and you can check out my Metaphor ReFantazio review on IGN.com and on the YouTube channels of IGN. You can check out my appearances on Giant Bomb and Kind of Funny from this week, and VGBs, talking about Metaphor in various capacities. So if you want more perspectives, if you want more insight, in addition to today's discussion, I have proliferated my influence at various platforms. And yeah, that's what's up. Give Blood God some money.
I agree.
I agree with this sentiment.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, we're joined by our Stars of Destiny this week. And this week we have Anthrax Bees, Flashback, 2012, Harvest Lunatic, Laguna Matata, 1, 2, 4, Lord Bob Bree, Rob O'Reilly, one of our intrepid mods, and Spyrus. Thank you so much for your generous support. We're heading now into the Acts of the Blood God post show. We're going to chill out, talk a little bit more. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Metaphor ReFantazio, so please look forward to that. In the meantime, I have been your host, Kat Bailey. Thank you so much for listening. And for Eric, Michael, Nadia, and myself, we'll see you again next week. And until then, happy adventuring.